written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. 1, attend council chambers in person. Individuals who wish to attend council chambers in person may do so by registering in advance of the meeting and contacting a corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in the council chamber. 2, watch the meeting live or recorded. Individuals who wish to watch the meeting may view it on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. Register in advance to speak during the meeting. Members of the public who wish to provide comment during the public comment opportunities found under items 6 and 9 are asked to register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at summerland.ca with the following information: name, civic address, method of participation in person, telephone, or Zoom. Further details will be provided upon registration. And request to speak during the meeting. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities may be given the opportunity, time permitting. After the chair has provided everybody who has pre-registered with the opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Corporate officer, any introduction of late items? Thank you. Could I ask for approval of agenda? Councillor Traynor and Councillor Patton, seconded. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes for the July 11th meeting. Councillor Barkwell and Councillor Patton, thank you. I believe we have one delegation today. 5.1 is Natasha Lukey on YouTube or on Zoom, sorry.
Mr. Chair, we recommend we just come back to that item. It could be they're having trouble on their end or something, and they don't seem to be on Zoom at this time.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Public comment opportunity. We have a maximum of 15 minutes, 2 minutes per speaker. Comments and questions must pertain to the items on the agenda. Anyone? If not, we'll trudge forward on 7.1 business items, Summerland Arena, Curling Club Facility Condition Assessment Final Report. And 7.1, this will be brought forward by our Director of Community Services, Mrs. Lori Mullen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Council. This purpose of this report is for Council to receive the Facility Condition Assessment Final Report for the Summerland Arena and Curling Club. The District of Summerland Parks and Recreation Master Plan identified that the Summerland Arena and Curling Club is currently meeting the needs of the community. However, the plan also recommended that due to the age of the facility, a detailed facility audit of the entire building, including its structure and plant, be completed. Stevenson Engineering Limited was a successful proponent through the invitational request for proposals process to complete the facility condition assessment. At 46 years of age, the building is being assessed to be in overall acceptable condition and just past the midpoint of its useful life of 85 years. The report identifies investments of up to $5.5 million over the next 25 years should be considered. This does not include inflation nor soft cost. Items which are in good working condition could be extended past its identified useful life term and deferred to future years. With investments of 75% of the outlined requirements, the building will be considered in fair condition after 25 years. The consultants recommend the building be replaced or have a significant renovation no later than 15 to 20 years from now, assuming no large programming needs or other design and operation factors have changed. Staff will assess the capital investment recommendations in this report and bring forward suggested budget allocations as part of the upcoming 2023 to 2027 5-year financial plan deliberations. Completing the Summerland Arena and Curling Club facility condition assessment is an important step toward understanding and budgeting for the financial investments required to keep the facility operational for its full lifespan, and when to consider planning for a major renovation or replacement of the facility. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Larry McSorley of Stevenson Engineering to go through the presentation slides, and then he'll open it up for questions of council.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So I'll just start sharing the screen for our presentation from the beginning. Can everybody see it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So again, thank you for letting us make this presentation. I guess we have two other people online from our two sub-consultants. We have Brian Lord from AME Group, who dealt with the mechanical plumbing aspects of this building. And then we also have Namita Magnana, which was from AES Engineering. He was involved with the electrical components of the building. What I thought we could do is just run through the presentation, and then we can kind of answer more detailed questions at the end. Okay. So just a quick review of the demographics of your town. The median age is about 54 and a half years old. You have a slightly higher than normal age group in terms of, I think you have quite a growing community for retirement age folks. Your current population is around 12,000 people, and you do have a pretty good steady growth rate. There was kind of a big spurt for the over a 4-year period, 5-year period rather, about 3.5%, but it had been showing a steady growth rate, just under 1% kind of in the last 25 years or so. So that keeps in mind in terms of when you're talking about these facilities, the context of who's going to be using it, what age groups, and how the demographics may change over time. What was included in this review was we looked at the building, as we said, for the next 25 years. We looked at both maintenance items, repair items, and life cycle cost replacements for that time period. We looked at everything from the site conditions, parking lots outside of the building, site lighting, landscape, the structural components, architectural, both the building envelope and interior finishes, and the mechanical electrical systems of the building. Again, we said we were considering issues in terms of life cycle and maintenance, and then we assigned a priority rating for each of those components in terms of when we thought they should be completed. If there was something that was very important, we gave a higher priority. Things that were okay to defer, we gave it a lower priority. And then we also looked at some considerations for code that may have changed since this building was built in 1976. At that time, barrier-free accessibility wasn't really an issue. Your building doesn't really address that very well at all currently. And it's not really code required retroactive changes that are required, but it's kind of your level of how much accessibility you want in the facility. If you want it 100%, if you want just the public areas accessible, it's kind of a council decision going forward. But right now the building doesn't really meet the requirements very well. And we didn't look at all the code issues because quite a bit of things have changed over this period of time, but we looked at the bigger ones that needed to be addressed. The building would be designed quite differently if it was built today. We looked at the building back in February, middle of February. We made one more trip back this part of the summer when the ice was melted. So we were able to look at the slab conditions in both the curling rink and the hockey rink. When we were on site, we interviewed with staff, both staff on site and maintenance folks that had the history of the building as far as when things were done last. And then we did an extensive documentation with digital pictures of the entire facility. We probably had, I don't know, over 1,200 pictures or so that we looked at for when we were on our sites. The building is at 57,000 square feet. Again, like we said earlier, we were kind of at the halfway point. 85 is kind of considered an industry normal age these days. Will it last longer than that? Probably. Structural systems tend not to fail unless there's some adverse conditions of a big weather storm or something like that. But generally, what that considers is how well the building responds to the needs of the public, how new things are as far as keeping the building fresh and current. So those are kind of those considerations that all kind of blend together to come up with that 85-year number. And then there's also some truth in the fact that things are not built as well today as they were 100 years ago. So the chances of some of our current buildings, lasting 200 years are probably a little less so than they were back 100 years ago, but we still have some historic structures doing pretty well. We came up with about $5.5 million required for the next 25 years. Keep in mind that this is a Class D estimate, so we have kind of a 20% variance that may occur in our estimates because we were looking at pretty high level review. This money does not assume any changes or renovations. It's kind of replacing like for like in your building where it is currently. We're not doing any moving of walls or anything like that, not expanding anything. So it's really keeping the current facility up to its current conditions and just kind of doing renewals of when things wear out is kind of the approach we took. We broke it down to short, medium, and long term. The short being the 5-year outlook, which is kind of what we're going to focus mostly on our presentation today. Immediate is dealing with code issues, and we did lump quite a bit of money in there for accessibility. Is that something that you have to do in the next 6 months? No, but you want to be keeping aware of where your building is. So there is a number in our report that talks about doing a barrier-free assessment and then kind of doing a little bit more of a detailed review of what projects would have to happen in terms of an elevator, washrooms, just general accessibility for ramps, things like that, so that there's good accessibility for spectators in the arena. So that's somewhat negotiable on that front end. There was a couple other things in there that we'll talk about a little bit later, but this number does not factor, the immediate costs don't factor into the overall $5.5 million. So anything that gets deferred there and slides into year 1 to 5 would make that number go up, obviously. So if we look at overall where the money goes in the next 25 years, it's kind of what we would expect. There's about half of it goes to architectural items, both roof, windows, doors, things like that, keeping up with interior finishes. About 25% going each to mechanical, electrical, a little bit more of a split there. We had put in a slab replacement project for the arena in there, which is why that number is as large as it is. Doesn't mean necessarily that that's going to have to happen in the next 25 years, but it's getting to the age where things might start to happen. And obviously, since it's a hockey rink, if the slab fails and you're not able to keep the ice in good condition, then that's quite a bit of a project you would have to do pretty quickly. And judging by some other towns that have been dealing with this this year and last, they've been spending about $1 million on that just to replace the slab and the brine lines. So it can be quite a costly project to undertake. And then looking at further out, the 5 years and the 10 and then the 25, the numbers change a little bit in terms of where the money goes. When you're at the 11 to 25 year cycle there, a lot of it goes to the architectural because almost everything on the building will have to be replaced during that period of time. So it skews heavily to the finishes and the exterior envelope issues. Again, it was broken down to those different components, the architectural, structure, mechanical, electrical. It is over a 25-year period of time. And then expected useful life are things that kind of there's some industry standards that are used across the spectrum for buildings, no matter what kind of building they are, in terms of how often you have to replace something. So, paint is typically on a 10 to 15 year cycle. Things like carpeting are every 8 years. Vinyl flooring, for instance, could be 20 years. The way that, if you looked at our report, we have quite a few things listed as acceptable. It kind of doesn't really talk about how dated it might look. So in other words, if you have a bunch of carpet that looks like it's, 10 years ago carpet, but otherwise it's a good condition, we give it an acceptable rating because we try to take the aesthetics out a little bit. So there's nothing wrong with the carpet. It can last another 5 years. So that's kind of, keep that in mind, why things sometimes get bumped to the next cycle. For the next 5 years, going back to the overall value of the building, we had come up with a replacement value in today's dollars of about $19.376 million. That does not include design costs, and it doesn't include any site costs. So obviously, if you had a slope site that had quite a bit of grade changes, there'd be quite a bit more cost involved with that. If it was a site that didn't have very good utility connections, there would be quite a bit of costs that would come along with that. So it's very site dependent. So that's why we took those numbers out. But this number is representative of a square foot cost of a similar facility if it was just built today. And there's no inflation on this either. So this concept of facility condition index, it's kind of used across a lot of municipalities. It was kind of a standard that came out of the United States. It is a kind of the gold standard of comparing buildings to other facilities, either in your own portfolio or other municipalities even. And what it does is it takes the outstanding deferred maintenance that you have for the next 25 years, it divides it by the replacement cost of today's dollars, and then multiplies it by 100, and you get a score. And right now, your building, if you did no maintenance in the next 25 years, it puts you into a category of a high poor. So what that means is if these numbers, if you spent no money between now and the next 25 years with what we know today, it would be in the high poor, getting close to that critical condition. Same thing at the 10-year factor, we still would be in the poor category, and then less so in the next 5 years, it still would be in that point. So doing nothing, this is kind of where your building would wind up going. So the kind of the comparison then to look at is if we did spend the money, again, this is the overall 25-year outlook, and then this is the next 5 years. So this, you can see that the building starts to deteriorate. You got to keep in mind that the lengths of these bars are very short at the beginning, and they get a lot longer as time goes on in the lifespan of the building. So I always use the analogy of when you buy a new car, the minute you drive it off the dealership lot, it's worth a lot less on the second day you own the car from the day you bought it. And generally in buildings, we look at something that's in the good category, probably lasting the first 5 years of the building, because there's very little maintenance that has to happen. Everything's pretty new. You're not really doing too much to the building, replacing light bulbs, things like that. You're not expecting to do major renovations. You may do some touch-up paint, things like that. So there's minimal stuff that goes on. When you're in the fair category, again, we would expect that kind of to be in the next 5 years after that. So when the building is approaching its 10-year life cycle. But if you start to invest into a building when it's that fair category, it generally can stay in the fair category much longer. Eventually, over time, buildings always do slide to the poor and the higher critical locations. But most facilities, you can keep them in the poor category, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that they're not new anymore. But if you really stay up with your capital needs, you can really minimize that impact on the building over time. And then what did we give in terms of priorities in our reporting? Number one was something that had to happen in this year, the next 6 months, that were really critical items, the short term, midterm, and long term. Again, how we looked at that is if it was to fail, does it really have an impact on the operations of the building? So again, going back to the ice skating facility, if the slab fails, it would have a huge impact. If the heating system fails on the building, that would have a huge impact. Things that would either cause your building's operations to shut down for a period of time were things that we saw as highly critical. So sometimes we gave it that score, even if it was something that's probably not going to happen for quite some time. But if it was already past its life cycle, we tend not to let it go too far, because then you're kind of hedging against a possible big issue that could happen if you let that go too far. So does it make sense to replace say a boiler in a building the year before its life cycle is up? Probably. So when we looked at broke it down, the numbers over the next 25 years, this is kind of where they play in terms of how they get divided up. So there's quite a bit of over half of it, almost $3 million worth, is in the next 5 years. Again, this $305,000 number here, $300,000 of it was strictly due to barrier-free accessibility issues. In there, we had a $20,000 allowance for studies. Until you do the studies, we're not exactly sure of the capital that's going to be needed, but that number would slide into this first 5 years. And if you're really serious about getting the building 100% accessible, you probably want to think about doing that sooner than later in the building, just so that you get some use out of it for the community. And then if we looked at different funding scenarios for the building, we kind of did this quick chart here that showed if you did something 100% funding, 75, 50, and 25, and we broke it down here in the 5-year outlook. And if you did all the 100% funding for the next 5 years, you actually do improve the building's condition quite a bit. You're down to almost a fair condition. So I mentioned that earlier, that the more investment you do up front, the better performing the building will be over time. But at the same time, you can see that if you let it go completely and only did 25%, it's really starting to go up to 21%, which is, again, starting to creep up on that poor category pretty well. The 28.5% poor category is what we had overall for the 25-year outlook. If you let it go at the first 5 years, we're already at that 21% condition rating already. So it can happen pretty quickly. The 5-year outlook is definitely more realistic because 25 years is a long period of time. You got to keep in mind that it's a snapshot in time. So other things could happen to the building in the next 25 years that we are not aware of. There might be some maintenance items that come up. There might be some things that break prematurely, things like that. Some of those things might look very differently if we looked at this building again 10 years from now. So we do recommend that buildings do get looked at every 5 years. You might have had a very harsh winter at some point that may impact the roof conditions or the exterior of the building in a negative way that it doesn't present itself right now. So it could change over time. And again, things like the roof, building envelope issues are the high risk items. Things like vinyl flooring and things like that are pretty low risk unless they're really in a deteriorated condition where there's things like tripping hazards and things like that. We didn't see anything like that in your building. So what's the next considerations when you want to look at this building down the road? FCI score is, it's one thing. It's kind of a scorecard type of thing, I guess you would say. I wouldn't overly focus on it because it's only part of the picture. The other piece that's very important is what's changing in terms of the building usage. So when I talk about programming requirements, building was built in 1976. That was quite some time ago. I was in high school, so it seems like a really long time ago. It might not be used quite the same way anymore, and maybe the building hasn't changed to keep up with the times. So that's what we talk about when we're assessing programming. Does it get used? Are the hours extended more so now than they were originally? Is it starting to become a 24-hour operation? You know, here in Calgary, some of the ice arenas are nonstop. They go all year round. They have a lot of different club sports in and out. So is there a time when you have to think about a second sheet of ice, perhaps, or additional locker rooms, things like that? Does the community space in the building still work for the community? Is there other needs of the community that you want to consider? And then again, you know, the age of the building, it is kind of middle-aged at this stage. There's a point in time here we want to consider how much renovation we want to still do to this building. And, you know, are we going to renovate it? Or are we going to replace it? How are we going to look at this? Does the site work, for expansion? One, two side. Is there enough room there if we did do an addition for, say, a second sheet of ice? Is it going to work? Can you still handle parking on the site? So those are, you know, all these different considerations that we consider. So just to do some summary, you know, your facility, not surprisingly, you didn't do anything to it at all, would deteriorate over time. It would go into that high poor condition. It would be very close to critical. But the good news is that you're, you know, very unlikely going to let that happen. So you're going to be somewhere in between. So you have to decide how much capacity you have to fund the building. Are you going to be able to fund it 100%? Most municipalities can't. So then you have to just understand the impact of reduced funding. So 75%, we gave that example there. It still kept it in fair condition for the next 5 years. So that's still a pretty good outcome. We do see this building probably having another 15 to 20 years of life in its current format. Does that mean it has to get knocked down and start over? Not necessarily. Does it have to have a major renovation? Yes. Can that, again, going back to what I was just saying earlier, can that be accommodated on this site? Those are kind of the next steps you would have to kind of, you know, look at in terms of, do we keep it long-term or is it something that we replace it with? So just a little bit, I'm actually an architect, so we kind of get involved with this quite a bit. The next stage, if you were going to consider either a large renovation or a replacement facility, would be to develop a program plan for the building. What's changed, again, try to capture that. Is there anything else in the community that you would want to try to tie into this building? We would do some staff interviews for everybody that are involved with this building. We would try to do some public engagement to get some input from the community, whether it's a pop-up site. Or you would basically also look at, you know, is there anything else in the community that you have a need for? Is there an aging library or a senior center that, you know, maybe would make sense to tie it into this building while you're doing this renovation? There might be some synergies to the whole thing. Right now, it's very popular to tie a library to a recreation facility, for instance. And then the other thing would be then to develop, once you have that program set, then you take a series of feasibility studies and you look at what's involved with this building. You know, if we had to do some major demolition inside to kind of recreate the walls, move things around a little bit, is it all an internal renovation or are we doing some expansion? And again, you know, does that fit on the site and what kind of costs are we looking at conceptually, as opposed to building it someplace else? If there's another site that the city has or might be able to acquire, is it going to be more expensive to build a new building versus renovating this building or expanding it? So those are the things that you want to consider before you really embark on a major decision like that. So that was pretty much I kind of went through this pretty quickly because I was hoping that there'd be quite a few questions and I can go into a lot more detail. But, you know, their building is in acceptable condition. We tend to call it that way because it makes it sound, you know, reasonable. There's a lot of things that you could defer. Again, there's always going to be pluses and minuses to what you defer. But, you know, there is going to be a time not too far out, things kind of can sneak up. When you're going to have to consider, you know, the next steps for what you're going to do with this facility. And that'll help you decide how much of this $5.5 million you want to spend. And keep in mind, again, that if we looked at this again, that number will go up a little bit. It might stay fairly static because I don't think there's going to be another 5 million on top of this at some point. I think it's going to be maybe, it might go up to 6 million the next time we look at it as far as the 25-year outlook.
Thank you very much for your presentation. First of all, an apology to council. I forgot Councillor Carlson is with us today and she's on Zoom. So just wanted everybody to know that. And if there are any questions through to our consultant or to our Director of Community Services, Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm a little confused, I guess. If the useful life of the building was supposed to be 85 years, and we're talking about replacement or major renovation in the next 15 or 20 years, my math is we've come up 20, 25 years short on this building. So what happened? Why is that the case?
Well, again, it's keeping in context that and there are things that may have not be working for the community so much anymore. So programmatically, this doesn't look at programming at all. This is strictly just keeping it as in its current format, no changes, just replacing the carpet, replacing the roof, no renovations of any kind. So it's unlikely that a building goes 85 years without any major renovation or program changes. I've never seen it happen. Unless yes, it might still be a hospital, but it's never going to be in that current form. It might still be a school, but it's teaching changes that much over time. So will hockey change a lot in curling? Those two games, no, but the technology that you bring to a building in terms of, if there's goals of energy sustainability and things like that, there are upgrades that could be made to this facility to make it more energy efficient over time. But are you ever going to get this to operate as well as a brand new building? No. So again, it's just it's kind of a guideline of what expectations, I guess, more than anything else. So it's probably could still be around for 85 years, but you have to invest into it. And by the time we get to the another 25 years down the road, I think there's probably quite a few changes that would have to happen to the building. So I think we'd have to undergo a major renovation, I would say, 100%.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Any other questions, Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this question would go to our Director, Lori. Right now, a person with disabilities has to be able to access the same levels as an able-bodied person. So currently, I know there's an elevator in the curling rink. So if a person with disabilities wanted to get to the second level where the spectator area is there any hindrance there, or is it more of an inconvenience having to go through the curling rink?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. If somebody wanted to be in the main bowl of the arena, they could take that has mobility challenges or in a wheelchair, they would go up through the elevator and then they can access the upper level, but they do have to kind of go through the banquet room and down a hallway. So it's possible, and that's how currently people in wheelchairs do get up to that level, but they kind of have to maneuver through a hallway through the back way.
Excellent, thank you. So, because when we hear in regards to the immediate and the 1 to 5 years is a lot of money, just basically set for persons with disabilities, and I know we have other projects on the go that we're talking about, and perhaps we can also look at tying in a better access for persons with disabilities in our future program, that perhaps we don't need to look at moving so far into that type of money moving forward right away on the arena. Anyway, more of a comment. Thank you.
So just to add a little bit to that, if you were to add a second elevator in the arena, you're probably looking at about a 150 at minimal price point, probably closer to 250, depending on what kinds of things you might have to change in that building, just to put an elevator that goes from the first to the second floor. So it can be quite a bit of money pretty quickly.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Acting Mayor. I can understand how, there's a lot of changes down the road in the next 20, 25 years that maybe are hard to anticipate now. And maybe it will be good in 20, 25 years. For another 20 years, we don't know. But I'm kind of curious, the building's 45 years old. Do we have any idea of what kind of changes have been done to the building since it was built up, or originally built, as sort of an example of the changes in the arenas?
I don't think there was a whole lot of changes made that I was aware of. I don't know if anybody else has that context, but I think mostly it was, there was some changes done to those community spaces in terms of the kitchen equipment and things like that were modified over time. I don't think maybe it wasn't always able to be broken down in size as it was now, like there's divider walls and things like that, to have some flexibility to that space. I don't think there was some upgrades to the locker room for the semi-pro team. I know that occurred, that there was some investment made there. So those were done, I think, in the last 8 years or so. But I don't think there was major changes to the building beyond that. I think it's pretty much operating as it was originally designed.
Further to your question, Councillor Barkwell.
So how long do big pieces of equipment like compressors and such last? And the piping that goes for them and heat exchangers or whatever they use, those sort of things?
Brian Lord from AV, the consultant. We get various components lab different lengths of time. Like compressors, for example, the type that you have in your facility, they're rebuildable, and it's like every 5 years, but every 10 years is kind of a major rebuild. Chillers themselves are a bit more frequent. They're in about the 18 to 20 year range. There's some technology changes that have happened since the last time you guys replaced yours. Piping itself, it's all steel. It's pretty well maintained that we see on site. That can last a fair bit longer. We usually see about 40 years for that stuff, for the majority of the piping, for the volume. But you do have brine systems in that have some corrosive materials, and that piping does get eroded over time and is replaced. A typical refrigeration plant for an arena, you'll see a major renovation about every 20 to 30 years is a common throughout facilities running on one of them.
Thank you. Turn your mic off, sir. Thank you. Councillor Trainer.
My question is for Lori. Should we happen to build our new pool in the parking lot of the arena down the road, was there a plan to have the two buildings connected, or would they be independent?
And thank you through the chair. They are intended to be connected through a shared lobby. And there's also a connection through heat exchange that we are investigating for tying in some of the heating from the arena to be transferred over to the pool.
So I guess information from this report then, would that help then when we are planning? Like, I'm just trying to think of any other costs that might be incurred when we do connect the two buildings. I guess this report would kind of help provide information for that. Okay, and they could be tied together then, that is reasonable? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson, anything?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll carry on. I would like to say thank you to Mr. Larry McSorley and to our Director of Community Services. Thank you for the presentation. We'll go to 7.2, which will be introduced by our CEO,
I'll move to receive that for information.
Oh, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Patton. I'm just hustling along. Yes, Councillor Barkwell.
Just sort of related to the report and where we go from here. There's going to be some decisions, I guess, on budgeting and how much we invest in the facility and what standard we want to invest to. I hope that when budget time comes, we are presented with sort of detailed options, just, questions like, what a priority is. It's hard to say something, how much of a priority something is, such as access, without knowing how much it costs. So, the $150,000 for a second elevator to provide a little bit easier access was a good example, the things that we want to consider. So I hope that when we talk about that we get the information about specific improvements and maintenance that we can hash over and set priorities for. I'll just add that I lean towards having a really nice facility. I didn't realize how much a nice facility can be appreciated until I went to one and realized I was living in kind of a cave before. Thanks.
Councillor Holmes, thank you.
I guess further to that, though, I don't think we should lose sight that I think this arena as it is serves the community very well. And when we're talking about, programming changes over the years or decades, I don't see that for Summerland. I see we use that arena for what it was built for originally, hockey, figure skating, and I can't see a huge amount of changes the way our demographics are. The fact that there's so many more sporting opportunities and different kinds of things that our kids are involved in. Yes, they still play hockey and they still figure skate, but they do lots of other things too. So I don't see the number of hockey players or figure skaters going off the charts at all in the next 25 years. I think it's, but it's Canada, so there'll still be hockey players and figure skaters. So I think it serves the purpose well, and upgrading, based on programming doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
No further questions. All in favor of receiving this report? Thank you. Now on to 7.2, and this will be introduced by our CEO, Mr. Graham Staff.
Mr. Chair, our delegation representative has now joined us from item 5.1, Natasha Lukey, fisheries biologist, Okanagan Nation Alliance. If you'd like to circle back to that item.
Thank you so much for that. Absolutely, we'll jump back to 5.1. Natasha, if you're on the line, please do your presentation. Thank you. So would you like to go forward to 7.2? Thank you.
We can. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, we are bringing back the final downtown neighborhood action plan for endorsement by council as a guiding plan. The plan includes a vision, action items, and an implementation plan for the future of Summerland's downtown until the year 2042. And it includes an action plan of goals and priorities to create additional vibrancy, livability, and amenity development in the downtown core. The development of a downtown neighborhood plan has been a strategic priority of council since 2019. The draft plan, if adopted, will bring near-term actions to be reviewed as part of the 2023 budget review process to determine what adjustments might need to be made in order to update the district's 5-year financial plan to accommodate those goals. And Darcy Roselle from Urban Systems has joined us today to present and answer any questions from council. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Darcy.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll just share my screen here. And hopefully everyone can see that okay. Okay, well, thank you for having me to present this final update for the Summerland Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan. It's been quite a journey to get to this stage, and we're quite pleased as to where we've ended up. So since the action plan was last in front of council in June, a public survey was released and amendments were made to the plan. So today I'd like to go over the results of the public survey, some key updates that were made to the plan, and finally the planning staff recommendation as per the staff report. So we'll get right into the survey results. The public survey was released online between June 16th and July 11th. There were a total of 37 responses in multiple choice and written formats. Responses from the community focused on the Memorial Park improvements, housing density, and the desire for active transit options. So getting right into the results here, the first questions in the survey focused on the proposed downtown districts, their descriptions, and the connections of these districts to the OCP future land use designations. So on the left side of your screen, you can see that over 60% of the respondents approved of the proposed downtown districts and their descriptions that were included in the plan. And on the right side of your screen, showing nearly 80% of respondents see a clear link between the district descriptions and the OCP. The OCP land use designations were generally well accepted, and there were some written comments that assisted in making amendments to the proposed future land use mapping, which I'll show later on in this presentation. Over 85% of respondents felt that the OCP land use designation descriptions were either great or needed some minor revisions. And approximately 65% of respondents considered the land use designations effective in encouraging growth in the correct areas of downtown, which was quite important. The correct areas. The responses demonstrate that the proposals in the plan related to land use designations are well received by the public, with some minor updates that were made to be fully representative of the community vision. So moving on to the Memorial Park section of the survey, the Memorial Park was a strong focus of the action plan, and a good deal of engagement was undertaken during the early stages of the plan to determine the needs of the community for Memorial Park. Approximately 65% of respondents agree that the proposed amenities in the Memorial Park master plan will meet the needs of the community, and a similar amount agreed that the proposed park enhancements will result in a central meeting place for the community, which was a central piece of the RFP for this project and a central focus for this project. So this question looked to gauge the overall acceptance of the future outlook and action items of the plan. Over 70% of respondents agreed that the vision and recommended actions of the Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan will make an impact on increasing downtown vibrancy. And vibrancy was a word that we heard a lot from the community, that was the desire for the future of downtown. And at over 70%, we feel like that's a good way to move forward. The written answer response section of the survey has been summarized by topic. So many items that were raised received amendments in the plan, such as an increase in density on Brown Street, an integration of housing densities, and a stronger focus on transportation options. The recommended street enhancements in the plan included active transportation options, and amendments to this plan were made to highlight these recommendations that were already in the plan. We received some comments requesting an increase in parking, for example. However, we found that there are adequate parking options in downtown through a on-the-ground parking study that was conducted. And in the plan, we recommend innovative options to direct motorists to these locations. Now, it seems that parking is still top of mind for many people in the community. And we recommend that the district should continue to monitor the parking capacity of downtown moving forward. Many of the Memorial Park features have been recommended in the Memorial Park Master Plan that were raised by the community in the survey. Then these included things like washroom locations, gathering spaces, and acknowledgement of Indigenous history. So based on these comments, we made some key updates to the action plan since you'd last seen it. So starting off with the big moves. So this slide is a quick refresher on the big moves that are recommended in the action plan. The big moves have been separated between catalyst projects, which are generally on district-owned land or can be facilitated by the district as catalysts for further downtown investment. And key actions represent visions, goals, and objectives to incentivize developers. So on this slide are listed the catalyst projects, and slightly different from last time you saw it. Previously, Henry Avenue pedestrianization was included under the umbrella of downtown street revitalization, which included the revitalization of streets like Kelly Avenue, Wharton, and Main Street. So the plan has been amended to separate Henry Avenue beautification and prioritize this catalyst project to spur on community interest and further investment. The pedestrianization and beautification of Henry Avenue is proposed in the Memorial Park Master Plan as a connection between Main Street and Memorial Park. As an all-season public washroom was added as a priority project in the beautification of Henry Avenue, and the washroom is intended to be in a central location and supplement the proposed washrooms at the southeast end of Memorial Park as by the playground, and as well as the proposed band shell. The recommended action timeline was amended for Henry Avenue from a medium-term action, which is around 6 to 10 years for a timeline, and it was changed to a short-term action, which holds a 2 to 6 year timeline. So on your screen here, on the left-hand side, you'll see the existing OCP land use designation map. And on the right-hand side is what is proposed in the action plan. The recommended OCP amendments are recommendations based on high-level review, and additional actions will be required when the district looks to amend the OCP. And further public consultation may result in some differences between the recommendations in this plan. So there's been the addition of 2 park designations, which you can see at the intersection of Quinpool and Am Avenue on the north end of the subject area, as well as on the south side of Jubilee on the east area of the subject area. There's also been a change from medium density residential to low density residential intensification along Victoria Avenue and Prairie Road on the southern end of the study area. Section 10 of the action plan includes an implementation table, which received multiple amendments based on Summerland staff and public comments. And I show this just as an excerpt from that section where you can see, for example, the third row down, the Henry Avenue pedestrianization. You can see it's now green. It used to be more of a gray color, which indicates that it is a short-term priority rather than the medium priority, which it was in the past. The recommendation of Summerland staff as per the council report is to endorse the action plan. And This concludes the urban systems role in the project at this stage. We've provided an editable version of the document to planning staff for any additional amendments that may come forward. However, we are excited about the opportunity to remain involved in the next steps, including the implementation of the plan. The action plan should be considered a living document, and the recommended actions it contains are flexible based on Summerland's future positioning. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions, Council? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. I guess my question is what does it mean to endorse the plan? When I go through it, and I've been going through this over and over again, I think some parts of the plan are excellent. I can't wait to get started on them, such as the Henry Ave pedestrianization. I think some parts of the plan, I have some concerns, and I don't think the public necessarily fully understands them, and I think it requires further public consultation, such as the OCP land use designations. I don't think the public really knows what we're about to throw on them here. And then there are some aspects of the plan where I just don't think it's going to work. And I think it's going to be a lot of money spent on something that's not going to be much of an improvement or improvement at all. I'm really reluctant to endorse those aspects of the plan. So I don't really know what to do. And is it possible to endorse some parts of the plan or other parts of the plan, or is it take it or leave it as one?
CEO Stat, could you help us out here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to Councillor Holmes. I'll speak to that from my own perspective. Joanne's also here covering for Brad. She may have perspective. I think it's really helpful when a plan in its whole form can be endorsed for the purpose of planning. I think it's ideal. If we start to parse apart the plan, it'll start to look less and less like a real plan for the future. That being said, at the end of the day, in terms of capital investment and timing, these are all things that will have to be worked into future council conversations through the budget process and added to our rolling 5-year capital plan. So I don't think the conversation's over. It's like many plans, it's not written in stone. And I think as priorities change and as things change, we can always circle back and at the end of the day decide what gets funded and in what order. But for the purposes of planning and with the community engagement that's occurred, the responses that we're seeing, we'd certainly hope that council could endorse this for the purpose of a planning function into the future. I don't know, Joanne, if you have anything to add to that.
Thank you. Just briefly, just looking at the recommendations of the action plan, most of those items don't have particular outcomes. They have general directions that would be subject to further public engagement, specifically with the OCP designations. That would be something that this plan is kind of laying out the starting point of where we want to see those particular areas growing and incorporating those concepts, but it would be something that would be subject to further public consultation through that process. But this would give us the indication that we would be reviewing those in the near term.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
I guess if I could just spell out a couple of my concerns, because I think they're kind of big. So one regarding Memorial Park, and the moving of the band shell. So last Wednesday, I was at the Wednesday music in the park. It was great that it was back on. It was a Rolling Stones tribute band, Chick Jagger and the Rolling Tones. And there were a lot of people there. There were a lot of people, they were dancing, they were having a great time. And I was sitting there watching, and then I kind of took a look over to the other end of the park to imagine where the new band shell would be and how this would play out. And the big difference I noticed was that, and it was a blistering hot day. You know, it was just really hot last week, right? All the spectators of the show were in the shade of those trees, and they were quite cool. Whereas when I look at the plan, and then I looked over where the new band shell was supposed to be, it's in the blistering sun. And then we're talking about putting a paved parchment in front of it, and those people wouldn't be there. They just wouldn't be there, you know. And there were kids, there were people with kids. They were going back and forth between the music and the playground. It was close, and it was a really intimate feeling. And that's the great thing about Memorial Park as it is now, is that it's intimate, and you can be kicking the ball around and still be part of the music and all that sort of thing. And I really feel that what's being proposed here is going to lose, you lose a lot of that. So I that's one big concern. And then when you look at the price tag, $4 or $5 million, I don't know if it's going to be a $4 or $5 million improvement. You know, that's so I just have a really hard time getting my head around that. And then the second thing is the OCP land use designations. I think it's definitely the right direction. It's what we've heard. We need to densify downtown. And you know, on the task force, we were explained how we want to keep the character of Main Street and Victoria and use kind of a step process to get the higher density away from that. But I'm a bit concerned about that downtown intensification zone, where right behind Main Street, you could have a 6-story building, right? And so maybe I think things like that have to be looked at. And then where it says in the high density residential zone, a minimum of 6 stories. I don't know if that's a typo, but don't we have a maximum? I mean, people, people aren't ready for this. The first 6 story, the first, you put the first building that's more than 6 stories that goes up there, people are going to say, well, where did that come from? Where was that decision made? You know, people aren't aware of it. 37 people commenting over the summer isn't enough public consultation for going that much higher. So those are my 2 big concerns, and I think that's what I have a really hard time with. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Parkwell, please.
I have to thank Councillor Holmes for bringing up that band shell. I've been privately wondering what it was about, and thinking, well, maybe somebody knows something I don't know. Like how much of an advantage, how much of an improvement is it going to be? And according to Councillor Holmes's description, none. And I thought maybe there was something there that I didn't see, and now I feel like maybe I'm right. There is no advantage to moving that band cell. Certainly not a $4 or $5 million advantage. So why would we necessarily want to include that and have people working towards that goal? Staff is, here's the marching orders. We got to work on a band shell. Maybe, so how do we make these adjustments? I'm not sure about the height questions and stuff, and that would come up during the OCP process. So I'm not as concerned about that part of the plan here, because you can't do anything without the consultation of the OCP, and we'll hear more about those height issues when we do that. But certainly that aspect is probably the single biggest one and I'm going back to the band shell. Can somebody explain to me what the advantages of moving that band shell are?
Through the chair, to Councillor Barkwell, I think the entire Memorial Park master plan, including the band shell, was developed through consultation with the Downtown Neighborhood Action Task Force, members of the community, and all of the amenities that you see on the plan were discussed, and we had a charrette day where we were in person, and what we did was we printed large maps of Memorial Park, and then we had scaled amenities that we split up into groups, and each group was able to place an amenity that they felt was needed in Memorial Park, and they were able to sort of design their own version of Memorial Park. And we then took all of those options and through many rounds of consultation and discussion, it became the plan that you see before you. Now, in terms of the band shell, that's through discussion, that was the type, the style, the quality of amenity that was desired by the community, and it was priced by our team at that price.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes, please.
Yeah, if I could just add something, because I was involved in the charrette, perhaps Councillor Carlson can add something too. So I think a couple things were trying to be addressed. One is that wedge, right, where Victoria and Wharton come and meet, is that underused as part of the park. We're trying to look at how do you make that part of the park useful, right? And then the other aspect was how could we fit in, create additional amenities in the park, and they're there in the plan, and I guess there was also thinking of having a great kind of common area as well in the park, if you got the band shell out of the way. I guess those were the kind of the main things that came up. But I guess the problem with the charrette is, all these things were being put around, but no price tags were attached to it. So now we have to, so now we have to deal with that part of it too. So.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. CEO Stott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to Councillor Holmes. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is that there's always going to be other factors, and I think inflation and construction pricing and timing are going to tie into some of those factors for when council actually may push the button on if something's actually built. The band shell, it's not just a band shell. So in terms of, are we getting value for that $4 million? It's a band shell, it's a year-round plaza. I think currently what's envisioned, and it does come from the planning charrette, is an ice surface that requires refrigeration, storage capability for a Zamboni to take care of that ice, concessions, washrooms inside of that building. So notwithstanding, I guess, your one main point you're making, which is the shade considerations, and if we can design our way through some of that, through shade sales and that sort of thing in seating areas, it is a year-round intent. And so the point would be to have that skating opportunity and that draw to the downtown for the continued vibrancy of downtown all year. But at the end of the day, when it comes to specific budget allocation and timing, changes to the OCP, as Councillor Barkwell notes, those are all things that become to council at a certain date if the vision is right. If it's council's perspective at this juncture that we do not want to have an ice surface there, then it's something that we would need to strike from this, or indeed perhaps we go back to the drawing board. But there has been a lot of engagement on this and a lot of planning and some council discussion on this. So that'd be a major feature of this plan. If we decide to revisit that, I think we would need to push pause and regroup and reconsider how that ties to a lot of different areas of the park, as it is meant to be part of a full season and integrated park design.
Thank you, CEO Stat. Councillor Carlson, are you okay?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Van Elf. And I understand what Councillor Holmes is saying, and part of I also understand what CAO Stat is saying, and I see utilizing that space was the key consideration I believe many had in making this plan for Memorial Park. So I guess it's complicated. It's not, and we have talked about it multiple times. This has been a plan in the works for months and months, and there was a lot of good engagement at the time. I don't think that this ban shall, as you can see, we just reviewed what are the first projects, and this isn't one of them. So personally, I don't have too much of an issue moving it forward. However, I think there is that caveat. Maybe it'll never happen. What is the point of having something in a plan if it's never going to happen? I don't know, and so that's something I guess we need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Any further questions? If not, can I ask someone to bring the resolution forward? Or another resolution? Thank you, Councillor Trainer.
I'll bring it forward. I just have a question for our CAO before I do that. So this is a question you always get asked. So what happens with this plan once we've either, well, presumably if we endorse it, where does it go and what does it do, and where does it live?
Thank you, Councillor Trainer. And so that from a public perspective, it would land on our website. It would be used as a guiding document for staff to help us into the future in terms of our overall plans for the downtown. And, even coming back to Councillor Carlson's question about should something be in a plan if it's not immediately going to be realized, I would say yes, still, because right, the ancient Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And this is a step towards a vision. If the vision is right, if the vision resonates over a longer period of time, and we say this feels right for the long term, then I think it should still remain in, and then adjustments can be made through the capital process, which is the next part of your question in terms of what happens next. We would be coming for budget deliberations on capital, even beginning this fall on some of the immediate term projects, and potentially further adjustments in the longer term capital planning on some of the other elements of the plan. That'd be the next steps.
Okay, so basically over the next few years then, as we do planning, we draw from this plan, and I guess at that time, whether it's an OCP change or an addition to the Memorial Park, we kind of decide, this was discussed in 2022, does this still fit with what we want? And we tweak it if we need to and make a decision. That's kind of how I see this. So I'm happy with this plan, and like you said, it's a fluid document, and it kind of gives us a snapshot in time in 2022 of kind of a vision of where we want it to go. It's never going to be perfect, but I feel okay with it because I know that when things actually do come to us and we have to make spending decisions, that we can always tweak it. If things change in 5 years, which I'm sure they will, we can always make a change then. So, okay, so I will bring it forward then that the Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan be endorsed by Council as a guiding plan, including a vision, action items, and an implementation plan for the future of Summerland's downtown until 2042.
Thank you, Councillor Trainer. Seconder? Second by Councillor Holmes.
I have a question.
Further questions? Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes asked a question with regards to the 6-foot height as a minimum. Can someone please clarify if that is what indeed it says? 6-story height.
Yes, so through the chair, in the high density residential area, this is actually an outcome that came from our downtown neighborhood task force, where we had put in a 6-story as high density. And through consultation with the task force specifically, they thought that there was potential for even more density than what we were proposing. And the plan was amended to make that promotion of a minimum of 6 stories to get high density development within that area and not providing an overall height cap.
Just to follow that then, does that mean that, like, I mean, Kelowna right now, they're talking about 46-story buildings. I know that, you know, we're not talking about 46-story buildings, but 6 as a minimum with no cap means someone could potentially come forward and propose 22-story building in Summerland in this area.
Yeah, so again, through the chair, this would be something that would be providing direction when we go out for consultation when establishing the change in the OCP based on the general concept, and then what the outcome of that process would be incorporated into the OCP and then filtering down into the actual zoning bylaw for height permissions at that time. But the general direction is to not be limiting ourselves at this point in that area.
I understand. Thank you, Joanne.
Councillor Holmes?
Question to our CAO, I guess. So if this motion is defeated, what happens to the plan, and could another motion be brought forward for further work on it?
Thank you, Councillor Holmes, through the chair. Yeah, at the end of the day, if this is defeated in its entirety, then I think we would have to circle back with council unless some further guidance was provided by council today on elements of the plan or areas that we wish to conduct surgery on the plan. Certainly that would be the case. So that's why the motion's written as it is. I don't know, Joanne, if there's anything you have to add to that.
I don't think I have anything to add specifically. It would be something that any further changes would either require additional funding to be found elsewhere to continue with the consultant, or it would be something that would be done in-house with development services and might require additional juggling of current workloads.
CEO Stott, please.
Thank you, Joanne. And the other thing I forgot to mention, if it was substantive changes, I think we would have to circle back with the community just to make sure they see the revised intent, as it has had exposure in the community. Not everyone who reads the plan will necessarily respond, based on the number of responses that you had referenced, but a lot of people have reviewed the plan, or they've been involved or even involved in the task force. So I think if there is substantive change, it might be something we'd need to circle back again to test with the community as well.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes.
Well, I think what I would like to see done is even defer this motion. I don't know if that's possible, but I would like to see us kind of workshop the whole plan with council, go through it line by line, and which is what we did with the cultural plan, and make minor changes here and there, and things that we could live with. I don't think it requires a huge overhaul, but there are some things I just don't want to give direction to staff to go ahead and do. I don't want it to be a catalyst project that, that's seen as a priority for the community. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't know if the rest of council is comfortable for sitting through a workshop and going through this line by line, but I think it's the only way I'd be comfortable with moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been sitting here thinking, well, how can we deal with this? And to answer sort of Councillor Holmes' suggestion, probably a plan like this deserves council's attention in a workshop type of sleeves rolled up, line by line or paragraph by paragraph review. And we know, obviously we're not going to agree about everything, but we might get a little bit closer to something that we feel is workable. And yeah, I think that council should give it that kind of attention. And I don't know if everybody would be willing to dedicate an afternoon to that, but I would.
Councillor Trainer.
Yeah, I would be willing to do that, but if we make changes, then where do those changes go? Like, then we have to go, because this was approved by the task force, correct? This plan? This is the final version?
Yes, the task force would have reviewed the version, I believe, that council previously saw before the minor tweaks from the outcome of the survey. And I'll just have Darcy confirm that. But I believe that that's what it was. They reviewed the draft prior to council's previous rendition, and then there was just those minor changes based on the outcome of the survey results.
And yes, I can confirm that.
Okay, so if we go through it line by line and we come up with a list of changes, does it then need to go back to them since we tasked them with doing this, or do we need to have further public consultation, or do we just make those changes and then sign off on it?
CO stat, please.
Well, at the end of the day, council can do what council wants to do. This is all just advice, including the staff advice, the advice of the task force. The task force, I think, no longer exists. I think it's been disbanded now that its work is complete. It's possible that members of that task force may be interested in getting back together, but it's also possible that they've given their best advice and now it's being perhaps modified based on additional considerations. So I'm not sure we'd be able to circle back to them, but your point about additional public engagement, again, depending on council's perspective or how significant, the cumulative effect of changes might be on a line by line review, then there probably should be some wisdom in that.
Any further questions? If not, I call the question. All in favor of the resolution going forward?
Mr. Chair, I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor, didn't know
Mayor
you were
Booth?
there.
Yes, yes, listen to the full conversation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, but seeing as how the item is on the floor, I do have a comment. And although I would be comfortable in spending an afternoon or whatever going through this, as Councillor Holmes suggested, in more detail, I'm not sure that it's warranted. From my perspective, we've gone through, well, the Councillor Holmes and Councillor Carlson were assigned to the Downtown Neighborhood Plan Task Force, and they worked diligently for 18 months. And this has not been the only touch point with council, or certainly not the only touch point with the community. The community has had the opportunity to voice their perspectives, and their thoughts have been taken into consideration and brought as tweaks to this plan. And then further, we've had the opportunity as one of the presenters mentioned to have the charrette on the Memorial Park, and that was a quite an intensive thing. We had the choice between two different concepts, and I think that, I think from my perspective, I think that we have given the opportunity both within council, with the task force, with the planning process for the Memorial Park master plan, which we waited a long time for, and the community itself. I think that there's been plenty of opportunity, and I think that all of these entities have had the opportunity to speak out a number of times. I would like to see this get adopted, and I will be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I call the question. All in favor? Opposed?
Did you hear any of that? Oh, you did. Okay, good.
I'm in favor.
In favor, in favor. I'm in favor. Madam Mayor's in favor. Opposed?
Yes.
Passes. Thank you. Through to our corporate officer, if I may, do we have Natasha on the line by chance? If not, let's call a quick 10-minute. Sorry, CEO Stott.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and I do apologize that we have lost Natasha. She's been pulled away to other things. But I just wanted to point out one single thing in her presentation. I'm not going to do the presentation. And maybe council's already seen this in the presentation slides or indeed the report that they have provided, which was informative. They're moving forward on some of the work in the stage one, and this is work in the stream and creating riffles and things, but that will necessitate the closure of the public trail in that area, and it could happen as early as the beginning of August, and then perhaps open and close and back and forth, from what I understand. I was going to ask that question today, but there will be some trail closures west of Highway 97 in Summerland on that public trail adjacent to Trout Creek. Other than that, if council needs more information than what's in the report, we can certainly aim to have the delegation back in our August meeting.
Thank you, CEO Stott. Any questions through to CEO Stott? If not, we'll call a quick 10-minute recess and be back promptly in 10 minutes. Thank you. This meeting back to order. We'll start off with 7.4 financial results as of June 30th, 2022, and this will be brought to us by Renee Belak. Please and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first 6 months of 2022 have been very comparable to previous years for the municipality. Operational revenue is on track across all funds, with actual values surpassing budgeted figures. Of course, the largest component of general fund revenue is property taxation, which was billed in May 2022. The water, sewer, and electric fund revenue figures are all close to 50% of the budgeted amounts, so very reflective of where we're wanting to be at this point of the year. On the expense side, all of the cost centers are below 50% of the overall budgeted amounts. Many of the variances are simply timing differences, with the related work being completed in the summer and fall months, or just year-end adjustments that won't be recorded until the fourth quarter. Specifically, the two lowest cost centers are the general fund debt transfers and the sewer collection and treatment. Both of these items have large MFA debt payments, which the principal payments aren't due until October of this year. Environmental and public health services are also impacted by timing differences, with the landfill closure liability being recorded at year end and much of the contracted work to be completed in the summer and fall. All other expense cost centers are over the 30% mark when compared to budgeted figures, the majority having expenses specific to work being completed in the third quarter of 2022. Overall, the district is in a healthy financial position and there are no concerns identified. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Any questions? If not, can I ask someone to bring the resolution forward? Could you please read it, sir? Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair. That the report from the Manager of Financial Services regarding the financial results as of June 30th, 2022 be received for information.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Thank you. Sorry, on to 7.5, landfill capital budget amendment. This will be brought forward by Jake McCoster, Acting Director of Works and Infrastructure. Please and thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Within the 2022 financial plan, Council approved the purchase of a conveyor system for the organics facility operation in the amount of $250,000, and also approved the construction of the organics processing facility in the amount of $1,833,271. Staff have been working with the design engineer and equipment manufacturers to potentially eliminate the requirement for the conveyor system by adding high lift buckets to the loader to be purchased. This has been proven to be successful in other organic facilities and will work with the Summerland design. As such, the conveyor system will not need to be purchased for the facility. The design and construction component of the facility is progressing. However, there have been a few construction-related increases in cost of pipe pricing and unforeseen geotechnical concerns. To account for the cost increases and to ensure a reasonable contingency to bring this project to a successful completion, staff are recommending that Council approve the reallocation of the $250,000 conveyor system budget to the design and construction budget, totaling $2,083,271. The funding for the $250,000 is not proposed to change and will still come from the district's land sale reserve fund. So the staff is recommending the following resolution of Council, that Council reallocate the $250,000 allotted for the purchase of a conveyor system for the organics processing facility in the 2022 capital budget to the organics processing facility capital construction budget, and that staff prepare a bylaw to amend financial plan 2022 to 2026 bylaw number 2022-01 to incorporate this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake, for your presentation. Any questions through to Jake? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jake, one thing that you talked about just now is we knew that the processing facility was going to be on a decommissioned cell. How does a geotechnical engineer not know of, why would we be looking at extra costs that the geotechnical engineer would have missed, or that we're being charged for more when we knew that it was a dead cell, we knew that it was landfill material, he knew that it was landfill material. So it may not be a fair question to you, but I'm just kind of at odds that we're seeing a geotech charging us more for something that to me would be quite evident when he was doing a design. Thanks.
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Patton. The site has changed a couple times during the design phase. Where it is right now, a lot of it is on partially native material up at the top. There are still the trees there, and we went with the advice from the past operators when we were reviewing it as to where they're replacing the fill. What the geotechnical change would be to install like a geogrid fabric, just to kind of lock it all together, because there is a portion that has some organics and some unsuitable fill material in it. This time we did approximately 10 test pits all over it, and that's what we came up with the engineer on record. So there wasn't an additional geotech necessarily providing that. It would be through the engineer of the project.
Thanks for the explanation.
Councillor Barkwell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was mentioned that one of the cost increases is due to increase in the cost of pipe, but isn't the pipe one of the materials that the contractor would have been responsible for in the, the budget, that he has and the contract price that he gave us?
Yes, with the contract. So again, through the chair to Councillor Barkwell, we had also put in a contemplated change order for additional conduit for future fiber, which came in very high, which we removed. And we've been working with the electrical utility to install overhead in as much area as we can. The electrical component was changed slightly since they provided, and there was some ambiguity as to the supply and installation and the lengths. So once the detailed design came out, I believe that's where we came in. So the extra conduit for the fiber optic and the length of it, there was a length that didn't quite match by the scale as well. So we were trying to go underground through the scale overhead, and then underground again back up at the top, and there was some discrepancy on that length. So the price was coming in higher for the conduit.
Any further questions? Councillor Carlson, are you okay?
All good, thank you.
And Mayor Boot, are you still with us? Okay, if not, I'll call the question, or no. Would somebody like to bring the resolution forward, please? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That council relocate the $250,000 allotted to the purchase of a conveyor system for the organics processing facility in the 2022 capital budget to the organics processing facility capital construction budget, and that staff prepare a bylaw to amend financial plan 2022-2026, bylaw number 2022-001 to incorporate this change.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Passes unanimously, I think. Thank you. 7.6, road closure and removal of highway dedication Fifth Street, bylaw number 2022-008, to consider the first three readings of road closures and removal of highway Fifth Street, bylaw number 2022-008. And this will be brought to you by our corporate officer, Kendra Kinsley, please.
Thank you, Chair Van Elfen. So before council is road closure removal of highway dedication bylaw number 2022-008 to close a portion of Fisk Street. Following direction from council at its August 23rd, 2021 closed session, staff have drafted the necessary bylaw to begin the process to close and remove the highway dedication on a portion of Fisk Street to dispose of the land to Summerland Hills Vineyard and Estate Winery. Summerland Hills and Vineyard and Estate Winery has prepared the survey plans for the consolidation of the closed road into the adjacent properties. The purchase of sale agreement has also been drafted. And following the first 3 readings of the bylaw, staff will proceed with the required notification and work with Summerland Hills, Vineyard and Estate Winery to finalize the agreement prior to final consideration of this bylaw. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions through our corporate officer? Councillor Holmes.
Just to confirm that I know there's 2 parcels there that are affected by this, correct? And even though they're owned by the same people, there still will be road access to both parcels, or there'll be access from the road to both parcels?
Through the chair to Councillor Holmes, I do wish we had the Director of Development Services in attendance. It's to my understanding that the road will then be consolidated into, the parcels will be consolidated into one, and the road will be consolidated in with those as part of the subdivision process.
CEO Stat, please.
Yeah, through Councillor Holmes, corporate officer is correct in that one of our conditions was that they consolidate the properties in such a way as we don't end up with a future stranding of property there. And so they have moved forward with that, which is why we're at the state now. We can approve it if it's council's choice.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, would somebody like to bring the resolution forward? Councillor Patton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That road closure and removal of highway dedication 5th Street, bylaw number 2022-008, be read a first, second, and third time.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. A seconder, please. Councillor Holmes. All in favor? Thank you. 7.6, no, where are we here? No, 7.7, solar and storage project update. CEO Stat, are you going to introduce this or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to share a few words and then over to our Director of Utilities, Mr. Storvold, who I see is on. Oh, that was my big entrance there. I don't know where that music came from, but it's about time I get that kind of recognition. So we're pleased to report to council that bids came back. A number of bids came back, and upon their analysis, we were able to identify a lead bidder and have concluded negotiations with that bidder, who's actually with us today. And they'll be sharing some slides with us in terms of presentation. And today we're not looking for any decision of council, but it is an update just so you know where we landed with the solar project, as it is a council priority. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Storvold.
Thank you, CEO Stat. Everyone can hear me fine?
Perfectly.
Perfectly. Great. And you can see the slideshow.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chair, we're excited to bring this update report to council showing the recent work that has been done on the solar project. So just to kick it off here, we'll start with some background. The Summerland Solar and Storage Project purpose is to strengthen Summerland's electric utility with a well-functioning, modern power generation and energy source, harkening back to the early 1900s when Summerland generated its own electricity with a hydro turbine as a lighting and power company or power utility. And as council recalls, late last year, following high bid prices from the first round of procurement, the project underwent a scope reduction in an effort to reduce costs. This scope reduction was subsequently approved by the funder early this year. Once we had funder approval, we got to work on analyzing the new market conditions and reissuing an RFP with a pared down scope of work. This second RFP received 7 bids, and after evaluation, we began the work of awarding and finalizing contract details with an Okanagan local joint venture between Skyfire Energy and Wildstone Construction. The project scope was reduced to allow bidders more flexibility in sizing their system. We also included the Summerland project budget so bidders could target best value for money while we still meeting the Summerland and the funders requirements for the project. Council, here on this slide, you'll see the table showing the scope for both RFPs, the original and the latest one we did this year. And the final system size, the Wildstone Skyfire joint venture will be installing. Project schedule. The project schedule is a compressed schedule. This is achieved by leveraging the joint venture's industry connections and their in-stock material. In 2022, during the descoping options discussion with council, we presented a target schedule, and we're happy to report that the project is currently 1 month ahead of that schedule. We plan to continue this momentum with Wildstone and Skyfire, who are targeting a September 2023 completion date. This would put the project ahead of the target schedule we discussed last year, and more importantly, would meet the grant conditions. A detailed schedule is attached to the council report as well, if you'd like to dive into the details. In relation to schedule, there are plenty of risks for this project in terms of schedule. I've spoken to council in the past about procurement challenges for electric utility equipment that are unrelated to this project. But despite that, and having looked at it in detail, my overall assessment is that the schedule is on target today, and I'm cautiously optimistic for the project overall that it'll be on schedule. Onto the budget. The project grant funding is $6 million, as council knows. The fixed price contract with Skyfire Wildstone joint venture is just over $5.2 million. Spending to date on this grant totals about $250,000. Other allocations taken into consideration, that leaves the project with about 5% contingency on the grant funded portion, the grant funded budget. So we do have some wiggle room there. So now, Mr. Chair, I'll pass the presentation over to Matt Simard. He's the pre-construction manager at Wildstone, and Landon Aldridge, the vice president of operations at Skyfire Energy. And Matt and Landon, you guys can go ahead and share your screen. And I'll just end my slideshow for now.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. Just give me 1 second here to pull this up. All right, can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah, it's good.
Great. First, just thank you for everybody for having us today. We're really excited about this project. I think both Lana and I have been following it since the very beginning of Summerland applying for this grant, and then and all the stages up until now. So we're really thrilled to be a part of this project, and thrilled that you've chosen us to be your EPC contractor. So as Jeremy said, we bid this as a joint venture between Wildstone and Skyfire. So Wildstone Construction, who I work for, we're bringing over 26 years of experience. Started 26 years ago in Penticton, and have been building in the Okanagan ever since, as well as many power and utility projects in that time. And then Skyfire Energy, which is based in, I guess, West Kelowna now, previously Penticton when we submitted on this, but they've got over 25 years of solar PV and renewable energy experience. So, I've worked with the folks at Skyfire for many years, and when we looked at this project, we realized it was a really great fit for our two organizations to come together. And we're, like I said, we're really pleased to have been awarded. So my name's Matt Simard. I'm the pre-construction manager at Wildstone Construction, located in Penticton. I'm an alternative energy technologist as well. So this is this is the type of work I love to do, I guess. And then I'll pass it over to Landon with Skyfire for a brief introduction.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Great to meet everyone, and really excited to to be taking on this project. As Matt says, we've actually been 21 years doing strictly solar. We've done everything from sort of small scale residential all the way up to utility scale projects throughout Western Canada. Just last week, we commissioned a 33 megawatts in Brooks. We've also got a 6.5 megawatt and another 106 megawatt contract slated to start later this year. So, these utility scale projects are in our wheelhouse as well. But yeah, really excited to be moving forward on this one.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Glennon. All right, jump in here. So, one thing so between Wildstone and Skyfire, the majority of work are going to be completed by our forces. But when we first started looking at this project, we really wanted to focus on maximizing local opportunity wherever we possibly could. And so part of our bid, we've got obviously Wildstone and Skyfire, which are local. We've also got Chute Creek, which is our civil contractor, which is a part of the Wildstone group of companies located in Penticton. Got SRM Concrete, which is also part of the Wildstone group of companies out of Summerland. And then for medium voltage contractor, so for everything that the Skyfire electricians aren't going to work on, we're working with a company out of Hope, BC. Our medium voltage and controls engineering partner is out of Penticton. And then, there wasn't anybody in the Okanagan that built large scale battery energy storage project or a system. So we had to go a little bit further, but we're pleased to land with a Canadian company called Evlo, which is owned by Quebec Hydro or Hydro Quebec. So Canadian company, Canadian manufacturing, they've got leading technology, and then they've got over 99% end of life material recycling, including, and then, socially responsible procurement, and it's available this year, which is really important as well. So, when we went out to market, the first go around with this project, most people are saying it was a push to get the schedule to work. And so we dug a little bit deeper on this round, and we're really glad to find the Evlo folks had stock. So between Skyfire stock available in Western Canada and with Evlo, that's really where we could have that schedule advantage that Jeremy was speaking to earlier. Lana, do you want to speak just maybe a little bit about, I guess, the experience that you have in the Okanagan? I know you kind of went over it a little bit already, but is there anything you want to add?
For sure, yeah. Well, I mean, as far as my history, I was born in Penticton. Most of my family grew up here. I've since been moved back in Penticton since 2015, so done a number of projects. A small project is actually on Municipal Hall there, on that roof, as well as the Arts Center. So we do have some history in Summerland. And then, literally hundreds of residential and commercial projects throughout the Okanagan. And this one's literally in our backyard, actually 2 of my staff members' backyard, as they both live on Sunset Place. So I thought that was kind of a good story, just to be able to hop the fence and they're on the project site.
That's awesome. Thanks. All right, now into some of the fun stuff here. So this was the layout submitted with our tender submission. So this is a very, very good overview of what the site's going to look like, at least from a layout perspective. So I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen here, but this is essentially the solar PV, or solar photovoltaics, I should say, also solar PV system. So we've got them in nice little clean blocks here, which makes wiring and everything else a lot cleaner and a lot more cost effective. And then up here, we've got some power poles, which is where most of the medium voltage equipment is going to be located. And then up here at the top, you've got your battery energy storage system, as well as your transformers, your inverters that convert from DC to AC, so it can go back onto the grid. And then an office building here on the bottom right. All around this facility, we've got secure fencing, and with access gates for vehicles and pedestrians. Yeah, and so that's the basic overview. It's going to change slightly, likely in detailed design, as we collaborate with Jeremy and his team to just really make sure we're optimizing everything. But it shouldn't change too much from this layout. And I should say also, if anybody has any questions, I mean, if you want to jump in, just feel free to jump in and ask them as we go through it. It might be easier than going back after.
We have a question here from Councillor Trainer, please.
Hi, I just have a quick question, just because you mentioned security. Is there a plan to have any security cameras on this site, and is that something that you feel is necessary?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've so I know it's something that we have to allocate for, so we will make sure that that can be set up for security cameras. We have, so it is built into kind of what we're planning on this site. There's also things you can do on these fences. You can imagine on the really large solar farms that are 20, 30, 40 megawatts and take up 60, 70 acres of land. Really tough to have cameras around those sites, and so they have systems as well that you can put on the fencing that basically will tell you if anybody is tampering with the fence or anything like that. So if somebody's trying to get in. But there is provisions that we're working with Jeremy and his team to figure out what the best way is to make sure that this site is secure at all times. There's also lighting on this site as well too, external lighting on the buildings and best, so that it's always lit up. So it's hopefully gonna dissuade any vandalism or anything else.
Okay, I just have one more quick follow-up question. In our previous plan, we had a little public viewing platform. I don't know if that's something that will be incorporated here, or will there be any kind of information sign for the public to read? So yeah, I guess, would we have a platform still, and will we have a sign?
I can take that one, Councillor, through the chair. So that scope is not part of the joint ventures contract. It doesn't mean it's not in the scope of the project. It just means it's not in their scope of work. So there are a number of items that we sort of peeled back in order to reduce that scope and bring the price down. So we do have some spare money at this point on the project. And as the project goes through and time moves on it and equipment starts to arrive on site and some of our risks are reduced, and we know we're not going to spend that contingency, we can start to plan for some of those other side items that are not specifically solar panels and battery systems.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I have one, if I may. On the base, the ground, once the solar panels are installed, are we looking at, possibly our Director of Utilities could answer this, are we looking at like a pollinator or something? So we're not looking at bare dirt, or we're going to have plants that attract bees and what have you? Is that something that's been thought of? And will it be irrigation? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Van Elfen. Great question. Pollinator habitat is still part of the scope of this project. Again, it's not in the joint ventures contract, but it is still part of the project scope overall. Irrigation, we do have the joint venture Wildstone and Skyfire bringing a hydrant to site and water to site, and they're going to get into the reasons why for that. So there will be water on site, so irrigation shouldn't be an issue for that. But yes, the short answer is yes. Pollinator habitat is close to my heart. I'm a beekeeper, so and it's been part of this project and been advertised as such since the conception of the project. So yes, it's going to be included.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, Councillor Barkwell, please?
I think this question would be for Jeremy. On your presentation, page 3, comparing the original RFP and the current contract, at the bottom right-hand corner, it says 3.56 megawatts. Should that be megawatt hours?
Can't get anything past Councillor Barkwell. Yes, that's correct. That should be megawatt hours. There should be a little H after the W there.
Now I can see that if we have half the solar panels, will generate half the electricity. Is there any sort of a simple explanation as to how come you can have half the battery storage capacity and yet be able to supply 3.56 megawatt hours of juice still? Or is it too long of an explanation for us non-technical people?
Thank you, Councillor, through Chair Van Elfen. It's probably a long explanation, maybe, but just to try to simplify it, the megawatt hours figure, when it comes to battery systems, that's sort of like the fuel tank size. or the size of the water tank, whereas the megawatts is sort of the size of the hose connected to that tank. So the joint venture, Wildstone and Skyfire, they've proposed this size because the EVLO manufacturer, their battery system comes in set sizing groups. And when they did their analysis, they put forward this solution because we provided all of the information we needed to the bidders so they could do the sort of their own financial analysis and give us a system that gave us the most bang for our buck. To date, we haven't taken their numbers and run a new financial analysis ourselves, but it passes all the gut checks on that. And so I hope that answers your question, or maybe creates more questions, but
You kind of answered my question, or what was going to be my next question was, what's going to be the scale of the savings on the peak shaving? Will it, so you basically increase the size or kept large the pipeline, you might say, the size of the pipe that we can dump the electricity back into the system, but maybe not for as long. Will we get half the savings that we hope to get before? It sounds like you haven't done that calculation yet.
Thanks, Councillor, through Chair Van Alphen. No, we haven't gone back and revisited those numbers to tell you, like, predictably through a model, how much do we expect for savings for this particular system. It will shave the peak for a megawatt for 3 hours or less. That was sort of our target peak shaving when we did our financial analysis. So it's on target for that. It's not the size. Our original RFP had it at 2 megawatt peak shaving, 2 megawatt for a couple hours. So this system is a 1 megawatt for 3 hours or so, depending on our depth of charge that we want to be finished with the batteries. So it's in the ballpark with what we did our financial analysis on. Although to know for sure, we'd have to redo that study.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any further questions? Councillor Carlson, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment, and it is a note of thanks to everyone who has allowed this project to move forward. And I really hope that all the procurement goes smoothly and that the construction begins on time and that everything goes according to what was presented, because it's very exciting to see this come to fruition. So that's just a word of thanks from me. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Madam Mayor, are you on the line? I don't see her. I don't believe so. So at this point in time, can I get someone to bring the resolution forward? Oh, sorry. Oh, it's still, oh, sorry. Carry on.
No problem. We can go through this fairly quickly. We're just going to get into some of the technology for everybody, just so you kind of you know what we're going to be installing. So I'll pass it over now to Landon to speak to a little bit of the solar PV system, or solar photovoltaic, I should say.
Sure. Yeah, we've selected LongG as our module manufacturer for a couple of reasons. Longevity, warranty. I guess capacity would be a big one, and availability. We're using LongG on a majority of our projects and have been for a number of years. So we've got a great relationship with the manufacturer and obviously have the ability to bring their product in reliably. Just so happens that we actually had some leftover modules from another utility site in Alberta, so we were able to put our name on those and redirect them to this project. So we'll be using a combination of 535 and 540 watt solar modules, and these are of bifacial in nature. So in other words, you could get some production from the backside of these modules with snow coverage and reflection. So LongG has been around a long time. They actually are the largest solar cell manufacturer on Earth. So they're big into the solar market. It's probably awesome. Good for me there, Matt.
Great.
And just given some of the geotechnical challenges and I guess unknowns with respect to this site, this go around, we decided on a geoballast system rather than using a helical pile. So this allows us to remove the structure if needed down the road, but it also allows us to really work with any of the sort of the landscaping features and civil constraints that we may find on this project. So we've done a similar type of foundation in Calgary 2 years ago, actually, on a 4 megawatt site. That's what the photo here is showing. So we use a gabion basket style style foundation and use local rock, which is obviously available to us through the Chute Creek relationship.
Great. Thanks, Vaughn.
Yep.
Yeah, and then for the battery energy storage system, so we chose to go with Evlo, as I've said, which is a Quebec hydro company. So they've installed in Canada. Their systems are made for Canadian climate, and they have this product available. So on the left here and the bottom right, that's really what the 1 megawatt hour battery package looks like. So pretty nice looking enclosures. They've got an alarm system. They've got alarm systems on them. On the side here, they've got their own built-in HVAC controller. Inside of here, they've got its own fire suppression system, as well as venting up top here, which we'll get into in a minute. So really nice looking product. The nice thing is too is that everything's built into this one, or into these kind of almost shipping containers, but it means that they can be tested prior to shipping to site. So once they get here, they've already been tested and proven that they work, and then we're landing them, we're hooking them up, and we're retesting them again. But there should be less time on site with this type of system in comparison to like a more modular system that you'd have to build on site. And then for our inverter, we're going with EPC Power, which is almost every BESS or battery energy storage provider is using this manufacturer, something similar for inverters. So this would be converting the batteries, which come out as direct current, into alternating current, so that it can go onto the grid and be used by the district. See here, I think the next slide kind of gets more into safety, so maybe I'll just stop again, maybe if there's any questions on the solar or the battery technology. All right.
Continue on, please.
Great. So for safety systems, so this is something that we, spent a lot of time on, just making sure that we're choosing a product that was going to be, incredibly safe for this site. We're from here. We know the, implications of fire and things like that. So we didn't want to skip it or cut any corners when it came to safety. And Evlo system has a great fire suppression system built in. So typically with any lithium iron phosphate battery energy project, so that's the technology that's in this battery. It's lithium iron phosphate. The first sign of any failure in it, which can turn into like a fire with a lithium system, is there's gas, which is typically hydrogen. So it's a flammable gas. You want to get rid of it as fast as you can. So one of the first things that one of the really great technologies that this BESS container has is that it will monitor for gas. If it senses hydrogen or any other flammable gas coming out, it will actually vent right away. And so hydrogen's a lot lighter than air, so it goes straight up into the air and disperses. It's non-toxic, so there's no real risk to anybody in the area, but it gets rid of that flammable gas, so that if there was some kind of ignition, it's way less than if that was all built into that box, which is an issue that if you've ever seen any lithium fires before, there's an issue that can be a big issue. So this gets rid of that and mitigates it completely, which is fantastic. And then the other piece is that since it's testing for that gas, right away it can send a message to the district saying, hey, there's an error here, and then you can remotely turn it off before it turns into any more of an issue as well. So and then secondly, if there was for whatever reason ever a fire, it does have these dry pipes, and it's got a fire panel and some dry pipes in here, so, and a fire detection system. So these dry pipes are basically a really large like water sprinkler system inside of it that remain dry until they need to be opened up. And every single one of these units has a direct line to district utility water, so that as soon as it senses any kind of smoke or fire, it opens it up and it douses everything, so you can't turn into a thermal event, I guess. One of the other benefits of this type of system is that there's you can kind of look at it as almost like there's unlimited amount of water that can come out of that system, whereas if you went with a dry type fire extinguisher, there's a limited amount that can come out of it. It's usually fine, but it is limited how much you can fit into a container. And the other really large benefit to this is that because we have to run water to this site for this type of dry system, we're going to be able to install an external fire hydrant on site as well too. So that can allow firefighters the ability to potentially support in fire suppression, as well as if there was let's say a wildfire event. There's also a hydrant now on this mountain that you can use to protect. Well, you want to talk about the solar system a bit?
Sure thing. Yep. So we've selected a SunGrow inverter. So pretty common in the utility scale market. I've actually sent a lot of my staff down to Arizona just this past year to do some service and O&M training with them. But like any other utility interactive inverter out there, they have what's called anti-islanding. So if they sense the grid is down, they will not backfeed. So basically a safety measure for line workers. And we'll have some virtual reporting set up as well through SCADA. So any fault, whatever that might be, will be notifying the district immediately, and us as the operators of the system.
Great. Thanks, Lennon. And that actually brings up an important point too with Evlo as well. I never mentioned is that we're going to be training some folks here locally with Lannon's team and with at Skyfire and with the Wildstone folks as well too, so that we can locally support the battery energy storage system. So we'll get some proprietary training to make sure that we can have locals available if anything was ever required on that site. You're not having to fly people in from the US or from Eastern Canada. It'll be within a 24 hours we can have somebody on site. Yeah, and there's lastly with the project or with safety systems is, one of the benefits, I guess, of having a local team is that our engineering, medium voltage engineering company or firm that we're working with right away identified that, one of the best ways to manage the medium voltage and connection to the utility was actually through a power pole style system. So these red dots here are actually all power poles that'll be located. They might not be right there. They might be moved a little bit based on what works best for Jeremy and his team. However, the benefit of this type of system is it aligns with what's already around the District of Summerland and what District of Summerland operators are already trained to use and operate and maintain. So, that was a big advantage as well too, is that, if you need to isolate the system or you need to run maintenance on it, there's not a steep learning curve for anybody within the district. So we thought that was a nice touch point as well. And next we had a video I just wanted to show you on the battery system as well. And I think somebody was going to bring that up for us. Do I need to stop sharing, Jeremy?
Yeah, you can stop sharing. And Steve, if you don't mind punching up the Evlo video.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions? Councillor Holmes?
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering what the life expectancy is for that Evelo battery.
Yeah, so it's a I guess a 20-year life expectancy that can go on further. So it was sized for the RFP requirements, which was a certain requirement of capacity at a certain number of intervals throughout the life of the system. So it will last 20 years and then should go past that if you decide to. There's a point where doesn't have as much capacity as it did on day one, and you might choose to change it out at some point, but you could operate it for longer if required.
Mr. Chair, I could just add to that it also depends on how hard we run it and depth of charge. So when we're peak shaving, we could run it, say close to, as an example, close to zero state of charge. And that would decrease the life quicker. So it also depends on how you run it, and we'll be working with the manufacturer on how to optimize that. And typically these battery manufacturers will have some peak shaving algorithms that we can utilize to give us best bang for our buck in that regard.
Thank you. Any other further, Councillor Barkwell, question?
Just out of curiosity, I thought I'd read that you don't put water on lithium-ion battery fires, and yet obviously this whole system's designed to be, put out with water if there's a problem. Is there some difference, or is that incorrect? If my lithium-ion battery catches fire, I can put the hose on it, or?
Yeah, so these are actually a little bit different than lithium ion, I guess. They're lithium iron phosphate batteries, so they're very similar. However, yeah, this is it's approved fire suppression system for this type of battery energy storage system. So, and you'll see in battery energy supplier, any battery energy system now at a large scale, they're all moving to this type of battery system rather than away from more of the lithium ion type batteries. So, and we've supplied a lot of the fire suppression information to the district as well for review. So,
Mr. Chair, I can add to that just really quickly that that was a question I had as well. So we had EVLO supply us with information, as Matt just mentioned, and they have had a lot of studies on this topic and found that to prevent that thermal runaway or to stop it, dumping water on the system was the best approach. So that's their design approach.
Thank you. Any further questions? I'd like to say thank you to the presenters for presenting today. I'd like to see if someone would be so kind as to put this resolution forward. Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Trainer. All in favor? Passes. Thank you. Thank you. Can I get a resolution to close the meeting to the public? Councillor Patton and Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Passes. Thank you.